Hi, I'm Senator Bill Stachowski. This is a report from the state legislature. My guest today is Keith Hyde. He's the head of the committee, Economic Development, Commerce, and Small Business. He's the director of the committee. And Keith, I thought we'd talk about some things that we're looking at that are involved in the state budget. I know that the governor, for example, we can start right in and say that the governor's budget had a proposal to have a complete look back on companies in the empire zones, and it's a very big issue upstate, and also new 20-to-1 eligibility, 20-to-1 no matter where you're located and what kind of business you're in. And in looking at this, we found some what we thought were very big problems in this area. So if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the executive's approach was taking a one-size-fits-all to the different regions of the state, and I think you'll agree that the 20-to-1 cost-benefit ratio, it can't be compared throughout on a standard one-size-fits-all approach. The different regions of the state, a salary, if you have two jobs that are doing the exact same amount of work, one job's going to be paid significantly more than they would in Western New York or upstate New York.
Yeah, and we found also that in various industries, for example, manufacturing companies practically never hit 20-to-1. Biotech companies, which are a very big and growing thing in upstate, particularly in Buffalo, where out of the medical corridor, 24 new companies have sprung up. A couple of them which were brought with the scientist that was recruited to work at Roswell, for example. And a lot of the times they don't hit 20-to-1, but they are good producing companies. I can give you another example, Graphic Controls in our area. That was a company that was Boston-owned, which would make you'd like it, but it was going to be moved, and some local people bought it and then expanded it, and now have bought a UK company, and now they're looking at even maybe further expansion. They don't hit 20-to-1, but it's a very successful company with good paying jobs for people in Western New York.
Right. I mean, everyone that we've talked to said that the overwhelming majority of companies don't reach the 20-to-1 ratio. And I think that what we should be focusing now on are those businesses and those companies that gives us a positive return on investment, the overall impact that these companies have, not just what they invest in wages or capital, but the trickle-down effect, the supply chain effect they have for the other businesses and entities surrounding these companies. And that's something that I don't think the executive has factored in when he decided on the 20-to-1 cost-benefit ratio.
Well, I noticed in various of his town meetings and then in some public statements, it seems like the governor's softening on his position. We know that the number listed with this in the budget was, let's say, significantly higher than possibly attained. That's a nice way of saying that. We don't think it was an inflated number that couldn't be reached. The reality is, too, at stake is the credibility of New York State and in its economic development programs and in the recruitment of out-of-state companies or companies from even out of different countries. If you have any chance to bring those kind of companies in, or if you're competing for the expansion of a plant that maybe has a location in New York but could have an expansion somewhere else, if you renege on your policy, that is, you have a 10-year period that a company is going to stay in this, and they met the requirements according to whoever was in charge when they went in, and we have made changes where now it's harder and they do have to hit a number, but the original companies, they met the requirements that were on the rules when they did it. And it's also interesting to note that this wasn't a governor's plan. This wasn't even a Senate majority plan at the time, which would have been the Senate Republicans who, for the average person, thinks are more pro-business, which may or may not be true. But this was an assembly plan, empire zones. And those were the original qualifications to be in. And the reality is they only have, the original companies only have a year or maybe two at the most left. So in the process of not destroying the state's image as far as economic development goes, we would be far better off eating whatever time's left with them. And as the other programs, as the other companies have been coming in, they've had harder standards to meet. And so we're headed in the right direction. And now we're looking at a overall policy for the future, and I think we're finding that it should be more of a staggered kind of solution, that quite possibly assessments have a role in this, and that different profiles for different companies might be a good idea, depending on what the nature of their business is. And things of that nature are all being looked at, and that's why from day one we thought there shouldn't be a look back, and there should be a off-budget discussion on what the future plan will be.
Right. I mean, all you have to do is open up a paper today or any time in the next week or so, and you'll see numerous companies that have been tempted or solicited to move to neighboring states that are throwing these economic development incentive packages their way, knowing that if this proposal were to go through, that New York State would lose all kinds of credibility for enticing any company to relocate here, to expand here. And another thing with the proliferation of these companies and the zones itself is that they only follow the rules that the legislature and the executive sign into law. They started out being these companies that would relocate to these distressed areas. They've been growing into now regionally significant projects, and now the current proposal would make every project a regionally significant project, taking out any kind of local input into the decision-making process.
So we have a lot of area to cover, and I think the most important part as far as the budget part goes is that we should decide that maybe we shouldn't be looking back, and if we can't, in the short period left that we have before the budget has to be decided, come up with what the new plan will be. We should do it off budget as part of the legislative session, and I think that makes a lot more sense to everybody.
Right. I mean, there's no question that the program needs some reforms, but the look back and the 20-to-1 cost-benefit ratio, they're not reforms. As you frequently say, that these companies cannot be punished for the policies that the legislature has set. They came in under the rules, they knew what the rules were, they lived up to them, and now you can't switch gears on them midstream like this.
And even going one step farther than that, there were safeguards built in where on the inspection of the information at the end of each year, tax year, there were provisions that said you could go through that company's papers, determine that they weren't even remotely meeting what they're allegedly getting, and actually they get the tax credits each year, so that's a year-by-year process. But there was also a way built into the system that they could be determined not to qualify. And those things were never used until now, and to start using them now after 8 years, saying for 8 years you qualified, but now saying, oh, we reassessed, and using the tools that we had at our availability for the last 8 years, we now decided to use those and put you out. I think it still sends the same bad message that they didn't use those rules. Well, that's really a bad situation, but the fact is they didn't, and we're stuck with that, and it's very limited time in the future that they would still get these benefits, so I think we would be better off just letting it run its course. Keith, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Senator.
And thank you for joining us on Report from the State Senate.